Gaming in 2024 is certainly in a weird place. A lot of games have really not done that well, but between those games, there are some hidden gems. Games like Elden Ring, the resurgence of older games like No Man's Sky and Cyberpunk have all tried to keep the gaming genre fresh. However, we still look for more and we don't really get much. But it's important for us to realize that despite the fact that modern gaming is not in the best place it could potentially be in, these aren't the only games that exist, and there is a plethora of content and games which have been available for us and to us for years at this point, and I feel like we often overlook those games purely because they're old, and especially with newer generations and increased access to social media, YouTube, and other such spaces, I feel like older games are, in some cases, certainly losing the spotlight. And I'm not talking about trendy older games. I'm talking about the obscure ones, the ones which are hidden gems, the ones that people seem to just forget about. And while that's not the fault of people, that's simply because of how quick the news cycle has become nowadays. Which is why today I plan to tell you about a game which is free and easily one of the best free games that I have ever played, and why you have been missing out on it. But before talking about the game and its mechanics and why I think it's such a great game, let's talk a bit about the history of the game and how it actually came into being. So, Alien Swarm Reactive Drop was not always a standalone game. Back in 2004, it started as a mod for the Unreal Tournament game with the simple title of Alien Swarm. It was a passion project by a small team of independent developers known as Black Cat Games. It was a simple top-down cooperative multiplayer game where players assumed the role of space marines tasked with exterminating alien creatures. It had a unique blend of squad-based strategy, teamwork, and atmospheric tension, and it very quickly started to rise to prominence within the modding and gaming community that it occupied. The developers, Black Cat Games, especially put a focus on the cooperative nature of the game, and it tuned every class and every aspect of the game to match that. So, as we mentioned in the previous chapter, the game's success certainly the industry, and it was picked up by a certain company we have all come to know and love. That company is Valve, and Valve is known for scouting talent from the modding community. For example, they did it with their acquisition of Counter-Strike and the Left 4 Dead developers. And in that same fashion, they acquired the Alien Swarm developers and their group, Black Cat Studios, and those developers went on to aid in other projects such as Left 4 Dead and the Portal 2 game. So after a few years at Valve, Black Cat Studios and their developers were finally allowed to remake Alien Swarm utilizing the Source engine, and the result of this was a standalone free-to-play game known as Alien Swarm, the same name, but with a refined game system. It had new game mechanics, additional mechanics, improved graphics, new campaign missions. However, unfortunately, Valve was more focused on other larger projects at this moment, so a lot of love and care really wasn't given into the upkeep of Alien Swarm, and it stayed stagnant in its development without any major updates or rehauls. Following the release of the original Alien Swarm, it developed a cult-like following on Steam, and with that following came a desire for more features. As we mentioned in the previous chapter, um, Valve essentially stopped updating the game and stopped giving it much attention, which led to obviously fewer updates, fewer development cycles, and much less content for the community to mess around with. So, because of this, modders slowly started to create custom maps, assets, and they kept the game alive in small circles. However, the community also felt the limitations of the original source release, and they wanted to expand upon the game's core features and functionality, which is why in 2017, a dedicated group of modders and community members introduced the game as Alien Swarm Reactive Drop, which was a free and standalone expansion to the original Alien Swarm. The primary goal of this new development phase was to revive and also expand the version that Valve released. Reactive Drop essentially changed the game. It completely expanded it by expanding co-op. It added a whole bunch of new campaigns. It added workshop support. It added PvP and many new game modes, and it also overall enhanced the difficulty and allowed us to actually experiment with different difficulty options. This is the game that we now know today as Alien Swarm Reactive Drop, and it eventually also got its own community and Steam page. That is the history of Alien Swarm Reactive Drop up until this point. There hasn't really been much in terms of development in recent years, but that isn't necessarily a negative because the game is in a decent position with a good amount of content and servers which are still up and running because they're obviously linked to the Steam servers. So now that we've talked about the development history of the game, in the next chapter I'm going to discuss each of the 4 distinct classes in some detail, and after that I'm going to move on to the gameplay loop and my personal thoughts. So the first distinct class is the officer class. Officers are the most versatile and the most varied of the 4 classes. Officers tend to be harder to kill, and their primary role is to buff and support other enemies. They tend to carry ammo and supplies for the group to utilize. Officers are arguably, in my opinion, one of the simplest classes to play and the class that I gravitate to towards the most. They can be any role that they want to. They can either focus on damage or they can focus on support with healing items and ammo items. The next role is the special weapons role. Special weapons, as the name suggests, is a role which primarily surrounds the special weapons that are available to you, things such as autocannons, flamers, and specialized turrets. Special weapons are focused primarily and purely on damage output. They don't really have much in terms of versatility, and their only job is to take damage and deal it. They are probably the most fun class to play if you like a run and gun playstyle. The next role is the lifeline of the group, and that is the medic. The medic, as the name suggests, job is to simply oversee the health of the other members and provide damage and healing buffs. Medics are essential for some mechanics in the game, such as the infection mechanic. Special types of enemies are able to infect your character with a parasite which only the medic can cure. Without a medic, a party falls apart very quickly. The final role is the tech role. The tech specialist is, as the name suggests, someone who focuses primarily on helping you get around the map by manipulating environmental factors. Technical specialists tend to come equipped with a welder which can be used to weld doors behind you to prevent enemies from following you for a short period of time, and they are able to activate special consoles which are essential to progressing through the maps. Tech specialists are also able to unlock special areas by hacking and slicing the code. Tech specialists do get access to some experimental weapons, such as the special weapon class, however, it is not nearly as varied. Tech specialists tend to be the most squishy of the 4 classes, however, they also have a high reward and are extremely essential, as without tech specialists, most maps cannot be progressed. So now that we've talked about the classes and the development history, let's talk a bit about the gameplay loop. In my opinion, the gameplay loop of Alien Swarm Reactive Drop is simple, yet it is effective. So the gameplay loop is set in a campaign mode. In this campaign mode, there are separate campaigns, and each campaign has a set of missions which need to be completed before you can progress on to the next campaign. This is a simple and effective way of keeping a lot of content and variety and difficulty, level design, and theme of the mission, and I think that's a good thing. However, there is also a aspect of replayability. This primarily boils down to the system in which you can edit your fire team. You can have multiple roles, you can have 2 heavies, you can have 2 medics, you can have 2 techs, you can have 2 officers. There is an infinite combination that you can utilize in missions, and that is a very good thing in my opinion because it allows for a different approach each time. Sometimes it can be a more passive, sometimes a more aggressive, sometimes a more covert approach almost. And that is a good thing in my opinion. Overall, I would give this overall game format a solid 8 out of 10. Furthermore, I also like the weapon selection, and I like how you can customize each of your character's weapons, and hence you can focus on different types of damage: long range, short range, burst, or sustain, so on and so forth. I think the gameplay loop of this game is amazing, and a easy 8 out of 10 for me. So now that we've talked about the gameplay loop, characters, and development history, let's move a bit more onto my own personal opinions. For me, I love this game. I think it's a lot of fun, and I really enjoy playing it, especially in single and multiplayer. I think there is a lot of content, there's a lot of replayability, there's a lot I can do with it, and I am confused as to why it isn't more popular, because it's not like free games are always not popular. Free games can be very popular, but I'm not sure why this one isn't as popular. Maybe it's because of its very niche development cycle, and the community that it was originally built around wasn't extremely widespread or very large. So that might have translated into a very closed and condensed community, which isn't a bad thing, but I think it's also important for people to recognize that games like this exist and they are still worth playing and worth breathing life into. And on that note, I'm going to leave you here. I will be linking this game in the description, the Steam store page. I urge you all to go download it, play it, give it a shot, see how it is. It's free and it's fun. Thank you all, and I will see you all soon. Goodbye.